started discussing why we would be using the knowledge component. Now, here is where we basically ground our agent on information that matters most to it. So, on a case by case basis, when you're creating your agent, you want to think about what is the knowledge that we have that we want to ground our experience on so that the best answers are available automatically to your agent. And if you remember in the earlier module, we added petco.com because the majority of our information is on our website. Only in that case, it was the embedded Copilot that added it for us if we, when we were using the embedded Copilot. You can always add a website at any time just by clicking the Add Knowledge button, selecting public websites, and then entering the URL for that public website. So you can do that yourself, probably just as easy as it was to do it with the help of the Copilot. But let's think about some other things. So I'm going to click the Add Knowledge button again, and I want you to notice the options that are shown here. So right away, there's 3 featured options, which means these are very commonly used, especially by enterprises. Public websites, which is any public website as long as it has been indexed, right? So think of search engine optimization or SEO best practices as a definition of what I mean by AI readiness for the most part. Then there's SharePoint, which is usually your internal facing SharePoint sites, which includes the site pages as well as the site documents. And then we have Dataverse, which enables us to add Dataverse tables. So these are featured, but also featured is the ability to simply upload a file. For this scenario, I'm going to set up something simple. Basically, I have for my Petco store a list of information about breeds in an Excel file. So when people want to adopt a dog, I know that they're concerned about what type of dog they should get based on, whether it's children in the house or not, whether they have an active lifestyle or not. So basically, this spreadsheet has the breed, a little bit of a few notes about the breed, and then whether or not it's recommended for children, active lifestyles, small spaces, and whether it's hypergenic or, for the elderly, right? So keeping in mind that this spreadsheet can have anything that's valuable from the perspective of this agent. In this case, I'm thinking about dog adoption. And this is a sample file that you can download and try yourself. All right. So if you notice, one thing about this file is I have configured it as a table. So basically, after I set it up, I configured it as a table so that it has these headers here. And this just makes it easier for the AI to recognize that those are headers. All right. So now if I download that to my desktop, which you can do as well, I'm going to click to browse in the Add Knowledge of Copilot Studio, go to my desktop, and go ahead and grab that data source. Now, when I grab it, it gives me what it thinks is the name of it and the description of it. And the description is kind of like super simple, so I might actually put more information there, such as comparison table for dog adoption breeds. Okay? Just a little bit more information in natural language. I don't want to get geeky here because the AI can actually use this description to help it know when to use this. All right? So then I'm going to go ahead and add this as a knowledge source, and you're going to see it start to upload the file. And it does ask you not to close the browser window because it needs to finish the operation of upload. So we'll just wait for that to finish. All right. So now you can notice in the list of knowledge sources, you now see that file added here. And you can see that it's in progress. What does the in progress mean? Because it's completed, uploaded. So what's in progress there? Well, it has to be indexed, right? It has to be available in search index. And in this case, because we've uploaded a file, it's been uploaded to Dataverse. And so the assumption is also that you have enabled Dataverse search as well in your environment admin center. So we do have to wait for this in progress to say ready before we can actually start prompting against it. So I'll be back as soon as this says ready. All right, so you'll notice right away that it says ready now. And that means that the index is ready for us to start testing this knowledge source against our data. Now, I'm not sure how much knowledge source information about dog breeds are on the Petco site, but let's ask the question and see which gives us back an answer. All right, so let's put, is a bulldog a good adoption choice for a household with children? And notice it says, yes, a bulldog is a good adoption choice for a household with children. It says why also. Bulldogs are calm, patient, and have good attributes for a home with children. And notice it got that information from our uploaded file rather than from the website. And you can see that because of the reference provided. So I've actually supplemented the website with this information. Now that I know that it's paying attention to my document, on the Overview tab, and this is very related to knowledge, on the Overview tab, you'll see a parameter here. Allow the AI to use its own general knowledge. And it is enabled. And basically what will happen with this is, let's suppose I ask about something that is neither on the website nor in the document that I uploaded. Now it might want to look through its own knowledge to see if it can find anything. Let's see what it does if I ask a very generalized question. Do you have a list of the top 10 dogs for adoption by elderly people? Just do something simple like that. See what it comes up with. And I'm very interested to find out where it gets this answer from. And there we go. So we get an answer. Very interesting. It tries to pull it from our knowledge, right? And in the knowledge source, there is some recommendations for the elderly, and it's kind of mixed in with small apartment sizes and so forth. So it gave a list it found inside that document. This may not be exactly what we want, but we will learn how to tweak these things so that they come back the way we want them to come back, okay? The reason you've got two references, both pointing to the same document, is because it actually leveraged two columns. It leveraged a column on low energy and a column on small spaces that are in the Excel spreadsheet. So it's interesting. You should test with a spreadsheet and kind of see how does it reason over an uploaded file, which may be slightly different from how it reasons over a website or over a SharePoint page. So do expect some variance, but it will never lie, right? You should never get an answer back that's incorrect. It is summarizing what it finds in the knowledge. So sometimes you should have to look at your knowledge closely and determine whether you should tweak it or not, okay? Now, let me ask something completely off track here, okay? Which car models can we use to bring our dog home? That is a question completely outside of the scope of this agent. All right. And it will tell me here the retrieved document. So basically, the knowledge source does not give me any information about that. Okay. However, it gives you what it can find, for instance, on the website here in both of these two cases, that could help people understand whether they need a special seat in their car and stuff like that. So again, keeping in mind. Now, there is potentially a question I can answer that I haven't played around with this a lot that might need the knowledge it already has, and it would come back with that. But it tries its best to use the knowledge that you've provided before it uses its own knowledge. Now, in certain business cases, what you should try to do is turn this off if you only want it to use the knowledge sources you gave it. In other words, you don't want it drifting off into some other pet supplier site. So you're going to disable that. And the downside of disabling that is now there may be a situation where it literally has to say, I'm sorry, I don't have anything about that. So that's where we have to make sure we catch those gaps, right? But by disabling that, we know that it will only get the answers from the knowledge sources that have been uploaded. All right, so you can see the benefit of uploading files, and you can make a decision whether you should let it use its own knowledge or not. And you see also from our exercise here how important it is to test and tweak. Now, that tweaking could be either a tweaking of the instructions that we have up here, or a tweaking of the actual knowledge sources, or a tweaking of the content in the knowledge sources to make it easier for the AI to map that to the intent. Okay, let's talk about topics. Topics are a way to actually trap intent. So basically you're saying, okay, in before when we weren't talking about topics, there were these built-in custom topics, and these are just like this start, right? Where we have a conversation start. These are system topics, right? And these can be edited, by the way. If you don't like the way this conversation is starting, I'm going to click on the first topic here, and you'll see that it will open up the conversation start topic. So when the conversation is started with the end user, it always triggers the conversation start topic. That's like built in, it's a trigger. But you can most definitely change what it says here. You can delete these words and put your own words, whatever you want. But the key I want you to recognize here is that it has trapped the beginning of this conversation in a topic called conversation start, which can now be edited, and different things can be done than just giving them an answer on top of the knowledge sources provided. So let's say, for instance, so you basically want to trap anytime they're asking questions about puppies. So in that case, we can go ahead and add a new topic. So I'm going to click on the topics, add a new topic. I'm going to do it from blank right now. We will do these embedded versions later on, but I'm just going to call this puppies. Maybe we have a special something going on for puppies, and we basically want to get them involved in puppies first, right? And we have specific things we're going to point them to, so we don't want the AI to just answer the question, all right? So we can decide whenever they use the phrase, I'm going to edit the phrase, puppy, could be as simple as puppy, or it could be specific like puppy toys, okay? Okay, I'm going to zoom a little bit. Well, let's zoom a little bit and reset our test panel. And I just want to point out something before I go on to an important point I need to make about this trigger. I am using simple words here because I'm in a demo video and I'm just kind of saving time. But in real life, you really want to use phrases here, not just single words. And you would use these phrases based on things that you have seen in your search index, in your analytics, and so forth. So, how are people asking this question? So, people might say, "Do you have any toys for puppies?" Or they might mention, "What gear do you have for puppies?" And so, if I'm trying to get all the intent about puppies, I might need to look at my search analytics and find out how people have been asking that question. But it's really not a best practice to just use single words. It's called phrases for a reason. Also, what helps me in this demo scenario is that I also know the word puppy is not going to be in any other topics, because when you're using single words, you're risking an overlap in topic definitions. So if that word puppy is in this topic and also in another topic, now the AI is going to have a multi-match scenario, and they're going to start asking you, what do you mean, right? So all I'm saying here is, don't take my phrases for this demo video as a best practice. The best practice for phrases is full sentences and or full groups of words, like toys for puppies would be fine as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. I might break a few rules doing this demo, but you shouldn't in real life, just to make sure that you don't have any problems with overlapping topics. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a question here. And this is very common, that when you trap a topic like we're doing here, and you say, okay, every time you're thinking about puppies, I want to get your attention. It's probably because you want to ask clarifying questions, right? And so right after this, you can ask a question such as, what breed of dog is it, right? Or what breed of puppy is it? And I'm going to let it just be whatever the user answers, which is identified as user's entire response. So it's going to watch the entire response, and I will end up with a variable filled in on this question. Okay, so I could call this question breed. Like if I had 3 questions, I might have question breed, question age, question, whatever I want to do. I sometimes like to have a similar prefix for things that are related, which helps me find the variables later in a list. Okay, so now we've got something happening after the trigger. You have to have something happening after the trigger for it to actually be able to show you what it's doing. And of course, we can add more things under here, right? So as you learn how to use this add node, you'll see how many things you can do, and we'll get a chance to play with most of these during these modules, all right? So let's just test again. So I'm going to just paste that sentence into the chat, and you will see that it asked that question. So it switched to the puppies. It wants to know, and I can say Labrador or whatever I want to say, Bulldog, whatever I say here, and then it would go to the next thing. And you can see the check mark, which means that's what I did this, and I did this. So basically the dark one is the last one that it did in this session. And so you can see what's happening. But as you add other nodes, you'll see new check marks to say, okay, this is processed, and this is processed. And I want to point out that you can check that variable. Now I'm very zoomed in here, but normally you would see the variables in the top navigation here. You can just click on those variables and you'll see that you have a variable called question breed, which is what we named it, and it's filled in with Bulldog. Now we can use that variable in the next things in this node, right? So maybe we run Bulldog against a prompt, or maybe we actually create another generative answer node where we now pass the breed with the prompt in order to get an answer. So, and we'll get a chance to do all that. For now, I just want you to understand the point of a topic, how it captures intent, and then you can do some clarifying questions, or you can begin to process with the end user before you directly send it to generative answers, which happens, by default, right? You remember the first time we did this, we just asked for that and it went to the site and it found an answer. But in this case, I'm saying we want to not get that answer right away. There's some more information we want, such as the breed, because maybe our site has toys divided by breed. I know that sounds crazy, but think about that in an employee scenario where documents might be classified by department, or you may have categories of products and you have pages dedicated to that, to each product. So you don't want them to go to a page with all the products. You actually want to find out which product they're talking about and then get them to that page. So that might be another example of when you want to do something first, get some clarifying information before you get that generated answer, or before you give a scripted answer, because you can also just manually type messages in here and have a fully scripted answer to questions, right? You could say things like, did you know about our new puppy store in Kirkland or whatever? And everything doesn't have to be generative. You can have scripted answers, and that's almost recommended when it comes to things that are litigious in nature, where you want to make sure the end user gets the exact answer. It can't vary, because legally it needs to be the exact answer, or there's some safety risk. Then you can manually script what will be said when they have that intent. And that way you don't take the risk on generative AI being used in areas where it shouldn't. Okay. So those are some things to keep in mind for topics. And like I said, we'll get to do a lot of these things during these modules. Lastly, actions. What's an action? This is anything transactional that you want. And you can have the end user trigger that transaction, an autonomous agent trigger that transaction, or the maker can just trigger it based on something that has occurred. All right. So when you're adding actions, this is where you can get those handy, familiar connectors that the Power Platform has, and you can add any connector. All right. So if I go here and I do a search for send an email, you should see that everything that has to do with sending an email, this is forwarding an email, send an email notification, send an email from a shared mailbox. So with these connectors, just like everything else in the Power Platform, pay close attention to the sub description as well, so that you know what technology is being used. Because send an email for Outlook is different than send an email with the mail application, which would be different from send an email with the Google application. Other than that, basically you're configuring the actions, which we will do a lot of in Module 2. You're configuring the actions that you want the agent or the end user to be able to leverage. All right, so that's a quick introduction to your tools, and we're going to go deeper in this as we further refine our Pet Finder Assistant.